When the opening of a drama is not a grand worldview, but two people in protective suits. Kneeling on the ground, dealing with an unrecognizable blur of flesh and blood, what should we ask? The shot is shot from a corroded hole, as if it were the victim's soul. This extremely shocking visual language sets the tone of a cruel, cold and cruel master. And what is parallel to this hellish scene is an academic discussion on the composition of life. Walter White, our protagonist, stands in front of the blackboard, like a rigorous scholar, calculating the chemical elements that make up the human body. 63% hydrogen, 26% oxygen, 9% carbon. These cold numbers, through cross-cutting, form an eye-catching alignment with that wolf-like flesh and blood. On the one hand is the chemical structure of life, and on the other is the physical destruction of life. Through this theory and practice, the director raised the core problem of the full play. When life is simplified into a series of chemical formulas, what is left of the soul and morality? When it comes to the place where the magic happens, those microelements are given a bone with blood at the end. This sarcasm is so cold that it is unbearable. In the end, all the elements add up, with a total of 99.888%. Walter says to himself, we are still 0.111% short. This missing percentage is the gray area where all the characters struggle, fall, and seek redemption in the play. In a flash, we enter Walter's seemingly normal family life. But under this normal, the dark has long been flowing. Aunt Mary, a strong-willed and somewhat neurotic character, just based on some guesswork, determined that Walter's son, Walter, was sucking up to his aunt. This happened in the confrontation scene of the nursery. The tone of the scene is called the textbook level. Scare stands on the ladder, stands at a physical height, but is passive in conversation. Mary sits on the chair, but controls the whole scene with a forceful aura. Walter, who is in the foreground, is the center of the discussion, but he knows nothing about everything. This composition strengthens the conflicts and misunderstandings in the family. Mary's suspicions led her husband, Dr. Tanker. The director immediately used a cross-edit to show Tanker's dual identity. On the phone, he is a Christian police officer who is being violently prosecuted, full of the roughness of male hormones. On the other end of the phone, he is the husband who listens to his wife and discusses family affairs. This strong contrast not only forms a good man in Hank's home, but also a contradictory unification with iron-blooded tough men, and also buried a series of good intentions and bad behaviors for him. So, a so-called countertextual education unfolded under the leadership of Hank. He brought Walter to a car hotel called Crystal Palace, a well-established hiding place, a small space in the car, and used a camera to zoom in on Hank's shouting and Walter's discomfort. Hank used the roughest language to describe the tragic world of the shadow gentleman. He thought this was a shock therapy, but he didn't know that this high-and-low posture would only cause him to rebel in his youthful heart. In order to make the education more vivid, Hank called a sex worker named Wendy. The power relationship here was exposed under the camera. Hank and Walter sat safely in the car, like visiting a zoo, looking at Wendy outside the car. But Wendy was completely exposed under their judgment and lost all her dignity. When the camera gave Wendy the teeth that were rotten because of the poison, the visual impact reached the peak. This is not only a physiological rot, but also a visual expression of spirit and dignity being devoured by drugs. What is ironic is that Hank made great efforts to prove that marijuana was a sedative. As a result, Wendy asked him, "Do you have any goods?" This instantly resolved all the seriousness of this drama. Hank's education failed, and Walter's crisis quickly escalated on the other line. He was pierced with lies by his wife, Skylar, by a phone call. The light and shadow processing of this scene is said to be wonderful. Walter was trapped in his own fabricated lie cage and Skylar was at home. The background is a bright light, which symbolizes that she occupies the pinnacle of morality and facts. Skylar said, "Don't come back tonight," and announced the first time now Walter was abandoned by his family, and could only return to his real trouble, the basement of Dominic. He made sandwiches for Dominic, but fainted from severe cough due to cancer. The broken plate is the most important selling point of this episode. It is not only a projection of Walter's fragile body and mental state, but also a key prop that will determine the fate of the two. Next is the core part of the whole episode, Walter's conversation with Dominic in the basement. This is not just a confrontation between a hostage and a kidnapper, but also a philosophical debate about humanity, choice, and fate. Walter was entangled in whether to kill the killer. He kept looking for the reason not to kill him. This exposed his weakness and conscience as an ordinary person. And Dominic showed an amazing psychological tactic. He didn't beg for mercy, but tried to establish an emotional connection. He talked about his university major, and his family even sang the commercial song of the furniture store in their common memory. When Walter realized that he may have been in Dominic's father's store and bought a baby bed for his son, the coincidence of fate made the relationship become extremely subtle. The two people who should be in different worlds had an unexpected because of a baby bed in space and time. At this moment, Dominic is no longer an abstract drug dealer, but a living person with a past. Walter's murderous heart was shaken. Dominic captured this point sharply. He attacked Walter like a psychologist. "This heart is not suitable for you." This sentence accurately hit Walter's vital point. He was convinced. He decided to let go of Dominic and return to his own world. When he went upstairs to get the key, he threw away the garbage and started to put together the broken plate. This action is the embodiment of Walter's scientific instinct. He pursued perfection and tried to repair the cracks. However, it was this obsession with perfection that made him discover the fatal truth. The plate is missing a sharp piece. At this moment, the camera focuses on Walter's face. He was shocked to despair. It indicates that the last tragedy is inevitable. When he went down to the basement again, all the warmth and resonance before were gone. Dominic was still saying that you made the right decision, but he didn't know that death had come. Walter asked him if he would stab himself with that piece. Dominic's silence was the final answer. The next tier scene was handled extremely realistically and cruelly by the director. There was no background music, only heavy breathing and struggling. The shot only followed the bodies of the two beaters to convey a kind of suffocating feeling. Walter's first murder was not a cold execution, but a stupid, ugly, and terrifying physical struggle. He was not executing violence, but being devoured by violence. When it was all over, Walter knelt beside the body and repeatedly said sorry. This apology was not only for the dead, but also for his own lost innocence and conscience. In the end, Dilla found Walter's lethal point. Hank took that piece of blue metal with 99.1% purity. He did not know that the creator of this artwork was his brother-in-law he had always looked down upon. On the other side, Walter left outside the painting, the dialogue about the composition of life should be recalled again. What about the soul? There is nothing but chemistry here. Walter used a bloody murder to answer the question. He completely restored a person to a chemical element, and the 0.111% may be the so-called human thing. So, do you think the moment when Walter really turned black was the moment when he decided to poison, or the Moment when he cut off the chain in the basement. Leave